Okay. I'd like to call the Finance Personnel Committee meeting for Wednesday, July 29th to order, please. Roll call.
Mark Williams.
Here.
Chris Herbold.
Here.
Mike Malchowski.
Here.
Tom Selk.
Here.
And Allison Brunette.
Here.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Need a motion on the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Comments from the public? I don't see any real public here right now. So we'll move on. Action items. Discussion and possible action on village manager position and vacancy. This evening we're here, this afternoon we're here. Basically, we asked department heads to be here to give us some input on what we want to see in a new position as far as a village manager and or HR director. After Mary had talked to staff at staff meeting, I believe, it came to our attention that this is what it was reported to us anyways, is that staff believes that we should have a separate person in HR, and but they still wanted to maintain a manager position. But we want to hear from you what you guys want to see and hear, or see, and what you're hearing in the ranks, I guess, before we start dissecting these job descriptions and separating them out and trying to find the positions for the, or people for the position. So I guess that's where we wanted to start out right now. If anybody wants to start out, I'll be glad to hear what you guys have to say.
Could I just ask, I haven't met all of you yet as a newer commissioner. If you, in making your comments, could just introduce yourself to me and let me know what department you're with, that'd be super helpful. Thank you.
It's on.
Hello, Terry.
Is it working? Okay.
There we go.
All right. Had to flip them on and off.
I'm Doug Martin, and I'm an engineer. No, I'm the Public Works Director here at the Village of Ashwaubenon.
Thank you.
I guess I'll start off. In speaking with the various employees that I work with on a daily basis, it'd be utilities, engineering, public works. Everybody feels very strongly that a village manager position is needed, the replacement of the village manager position, without a doubt. All of us work in different specialties, if you will, and there are numerous times where the village manager is plugged into each of us and getting information from each of us, whether it be for development projects, development agreements, things of that nature. So it's critical that that position stays as is and is part of the future. The area that we saw, and the employees that I work with and talk to, that we saw where there was a challenge, I guess, for lack of a better term, is in the HR aspect. That is, there is so much with HR, even if you just take the insurance component of it, that is changing all the time, and that's almost a full-time job in and of itself. It's no secret that we've changed health programs here over the past few years, and with that comes a lot of questions. So employees are looking to get answers and whatnot, and when it's one person, being a village manager, who's doing that work plus the HR component, that can get to be quite a bit at points in time. So the thinking was, at least in our discussions, was that understanding that the budget times are going to be tough for the next year or next 2 years, you have the village manager position to fill. Possibly there is some type of way there could be, I'll equate it to the nurse that's here from Bellin, or Mike Diener that's here as the assessor, where they're here a day or maybe 2 days a week, and it could be a contracted individual or something of that nature. I'm throwing just ideas out there, whereby the staff would know that there's a person here that they could talk to regarding any facet of HR, you know, a Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, something of that nature. And then there would be, in the interim time, Terry currently handles a lot of the paperwork and contacts and things of that nature, but she would be able to queue things up for that individual or that contractor, if you will, in the same way that Barb Baton does for Mike Diener, to help make it through. Again, from those that I work with and those that I talk to, they felt that if there was anything to change into the future, that was the one component that is a large project in and of itself and could use the assistance.
In your opinion, what would be more important to get, a village manager or an HR person?
Village manager position.
Village would be the number one.
Yep.
Because we kicked around HR person, and I know.
Hey, Gary, can you talk on the mic, please? Yeah, should.
We've talked about an HR person, and we like the idea. It's just that how are we going to do it? But I didn't know if you had any thoughts on, is that more important than a village manager?
Right, and over the years we've grown here at the village. Prior to Allison, when Steve Kabaki was the village manager, Bobby Skalecki was the secretary, and she handled some of the duties, and there was a couple other departments that helped with some of the duties. And I think when Steve left and Allison came on board, when we were interviewing for that position, the thought was, well, let's try and, we heard at that point in time that we needed more HR, so let's work that into the village manager position and see how it goes. Well, lo and behold, the village has grown some more, and there's more work that's come about, larger projects that have come about, and that takes time and effort of the village manager. And the HR duties are one of those things that you do the best you can with, just like a safety program. You know, in Public Works, we have a safety program that we have to run, good, bad, or indifferent. As things get busy, some of those items you think, yep, we have to get to it, we have to get to it, we have to get to it, and all of a sudden it's September and you go, we got to get to it. And when you're dealing with HR and 100 and some employees here, questions, issues, items come up throughout the year, and it can be tough for that position just to get answers, you know, on the spot when somebody may have a question on something. Even though it's being directed more and more for people to, you know, follow their own or keep track of their own insurance, there's always going to be some questions that come about. And I think that's what, that's where the benefit is. But the village manager is the position that needs to be filled immediately. It's just how do we bridge that gap or get something in there for the HR component in the future.
You being, I believe, the senior manager in the village here, been here the longest, you've always worked for a village manager. Did you work for just the village president at all? That was...
No, when I started, Steve Kabaki was here as the
Kabaki was here.
village administrator,
Okay.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right.
Allison, just so you know, Gary is a village trustee, so.
Well, I meant to introduce myself,
I kind of figured.
but I didn't want to butt in on this meeting, so thanks, Mark.
Nice to meet you.
All
Okay.
right, thanks, Doug.
Rex, or anybody?
Is there any continuing themes that you're seeing, Doug, from the employees about what's missing and how can we fix the vacancy of any specific issues?
I've asked a number of times because I had heard we were going to be asked to this meeting, so I touched base with all the managerial staff that I work with, and then reached out to all the field crews that I work with, and that seemed to be the biggest item. Was we hire people to be specialists in some of their areas. We hire people to be masons, we hire them to be mechanics, we hire them to be work in water utilities. Insurance is an area that can be foreign to some people and brings up questions, and that's the area where we have guys that can do and gals that can do some amazing things. When it comes to insurance, that can be a question point in a place where they need assistance, and we've changed programs over the years, which is great. It's just that there's always going to be some of those questions there, and what do you do in certain circumstances? And that was the big, at least those I talked to, that was the overriding item that they saw. And the thought process is along with that, you have safety programs, you have the onboarding process when you bring people, new employees on board. That can be assisted, almost like a team, if you will, with if it's a contracted individual or whatnot in the near future here. And then, like I said, you have Terry, who handles a lot of that right now in the office.
I think it's interesting that you note insurance management as such a key area. We analyzed 15 position descriptions in advance of this meeting, and I'm sorry you guys just got this, but I just made it. I put together this spreadsheet that highlights the shared responsibilities under both an administrator type role and an HR type role, and the green or yellow boxes just kind of associate with which roles and responsibilities apply with those roles in different communities. Might not be 100% correct based on what the position description actually says versus what the expectations are, but Ashwaubenon is the only municipality of those we compared that expects the manager or administrator to manage the insurance program. None of these other communities include that in their role, likely because of some of the things Doug just shared with the complexity of it. And even on the HR side, it's not even 100% of communities that have HR directors have insurance management. That very likely might be a contracted role in and of itself.
Okay. Anybody else? I mean, we don't want to keep you guys here as long as you have to, but just want to get your opinions. Rex?
Rex Smelberg. I am the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. Really, I'm going to guess that most of us are going to echo what Doug already discussed a little bit. At least I think that's what's going to happen. I'll come out and say that I think priority-wise, I think the village manager should be number one. I think it's the key position, along with our village president in the village, that is working with so many aspects of business, of revenue coming in, of being the point for when issues arise. So I think a village manager is the number one important aspect out of the two. Then it gets down to the budget. This is my own opinion. I mean, if the budget allows, I definitely think there should be a human resource person, whether it's in-house or whether it's contracted. Short of funding, certainly the village manager can do some of that work. Our previous village managers have, although they've struggled to find the additional time to do it. And sometimes it's a struggle to find them, or to find time to talk with them about some of those issues, because there's such a wide breadth of things going on. What I've seen in a couple instances, it was almost awkward for some staff my staff talking to a village manager about insurance issues, because when you're talking about insurance issues and what you can do and what you can't do, you almost have to wind up talking about what's happening personally in your life about health. And sometimes for talking to ultimately, I mean, it's for us, our supervisor about that, sometimes it's a little awkward, I'll be honest with you, because maybe you don't want that person to fully know everything that's happening health-wise, you know what I mean? Like that's supposed to be confidential information, but if you've got to talk to your supervisor about insurance, you wind up talking to them about health, your health and your family's health and what's going on in your life and things like that. So there have been a couple instances, and I think it's been handled very well so far, but at times it can get almost awkward for some people doing that. So having a separate, again, whether it be contracted for however many hours might be available, or having an in-house person, you know, I think that takes that awkwardness away, where you always know that person's going to be there and that's what they focus on and that's what you can talk with them about, and it doesn't go further than that typically, or in terms of out there of what potentially is happening, you know, in a family unit health-wise, for those people that don't want other people to know. So those are some of my thoughts. I've got 7 full-time people. Most of the issues I've had, not issues, but concerning questions, again, work around insurance and the changes of insurance and the changes of plans, and it's constantly changing, and it's hard as employees to keep up with all of those changes, and okay, what's the process this year, what, you know, and having that HR aspect of it available to you whenever you need it is, I think, very important for the security of employees. To make them feel good that someone's going to be there and guiding them through whatever process needs to be guided through. Our department also has about 150 part-timers during the summertime, or at least it did pre-COVID. But hopefully as we start to deal with whatever is out there, we'll be back to that number. And you know, they don't have a lot of issues because they are part-time, but there are certainly issues as well with having that many part-timers and a little bit different aspect of things versus full-time questions and full-time issues. Having that part-time, or having that human resource person available in those instances would again allow the village manager to do what they need to do without having to take time, you know, to deal with all the, I don't want to say the ticky-tack stuff, but there's a lot of little ticky-tack stuff that goes on in the summertime that needs to be addressed.
Rex, you have a lot of part-time employees. Who does the recruiting of those people? And do you envision?
Myself and our staff.
You see that continuing? Or if you added an HR person, would they do recruiting?
I see us still doing it only because we get most of our staff from the high school, graduating seniors or people on different sports teams. So quite honestly, and it could be, I mean, it depends where the HR person, quite honestly, is going to live and the relationship they have with the people in the community. Because we go directly into the high school, we directly talk to the coaches, to some of the teachers, to some of the key staff people in there. Because you can put something up online and not, you know, and you get no applications. You got to beat the bushes these days, or at least that was what we've found up to this point, to find staff. And it's getting tougher and tougher to find staff, especially that age group, because of all the extracurricular involvement kids have these days. Parents don't make them work anymore. And so it's a whole different ballgame. So we've been doing most of our recruiting while yes, it's online. The majority of the people we've hired are from Ashwaubenon High School, and it's from shaking the trees and talking to the coaches and having the coaches and key staff members of the school district specifically kind of push some kids to apply for jobs that they know they would be well suited for and would do well with us.
So you do the screening, you do the background checks, et cetera, et cetera. Your staff does that now?
Background checks are given to Beth, which is Tony's secretary, I guess. So she does the background checks. We do our own checks. Basically, we go on Wisconsin Circuit Court Access and the Wisconsin Sex Offender Registry. And we will, you know, anyone can do that by going on those websites, typing in a person's name and just seeing what their background is. It's a little time consuming. But that's what works for us in our situation right now. But the driver's checks, because anyone 18 who's driving obviously needs to have a background check on their driver's license now. That's all done by Beth. And then Terry does a lot of the screening and gets all the information back from Bellin, because then they have to have their drug test done at Bellin. So we send them, we've got like a form letter we give them, you got to go to Bellin, get your drug test done. So then we send them to Bellin, and Bellin sends back the results. Typically, it's been to the village manager in the past, and then Terry or the village manager has sent us back that information on how the drug screening went. I don't know, Doug, do you do anything specifically with driver's records or anything like that that typically Allison or other people have done, or is that all in-house with you?
We don't have as many part-time folks come on board as Rex does. Ours are more when it comes up for full-time hirings, and we have that through our iSolve system here at work, and we work with Terry on the job descriptions, and then there's a program that she runs for us and pulls all of the applicants that come through, and then we work with her on setting up interviews and things of that nature. So ours are more on the full-time end. The part-time end is similar to what Rex described, but we only have 5 or 6 per year in Public Works.
So far, it sounds like Terry's an HR director.
Again, for the part-time, at least for Park and Recreation, we do a lot of it in-house. The kids, it's different these days from when we applied for jobs when we were younger. They all want to be texted, and sometimes you got to text them 5 times to get them to come in or turn something in or whatever, because they've got after-school curricular activities and sports and stuff like that. So if you do it in-house, you have that little more personal touch, and you kind of give them that extra kick. Okay, we need this, we need you to come in for that, you know, that type of thing. So a lot of that stuff is done in-house, and quite honestly works very well being done in-house, at least for the Park and Recreation aspect of it. Just because again, they need that extra nudge, and typically, you know, working for bigger municipalities in the past, personally, I mean, an HR person has such a wide breadth of things, it's sometimes better to do those personal touches in-house.
Could you please walk me through, both for these seasonal positions and also for full-time positions, who manages position postings, both, you know, originally creating them, making the decisions on what entities or boards they'll be posted on, and then secondly, once a candidate's selected, who's responsible for adding them into the system as an employee for payroll purposes?
Sure. So typically, and I'm just going to, I can't speak for the other departments, but I'll talk with Park and Recreation. So we've got literally dozens of job descriptions for all the different types of jobs. So if we need to update a job description, that's typically done in-house. Based on, and talking to different other municipalities, what do you have, and you kind of craft your own job description that fits what your specific job is. Typically that job description in our end has been run past the village manager, does this look okay? Or it could even be run by the village attorney to make sure that the verbiage is okay. And then it comes back to us, our front office person. You guys, most of you know Susie, she's our secretary in the department. She will post it on iSolve, and then the applications, people can apply online, that type of a thing. As people apply online, sometimes the deadline is going to be left open, sometimes there's a hard deadline, depends on the position and how many positions are needed. We will look through, let's say there's a dozen applications and we need, you know, we want to interview, I think we want to interview maybe 5 or 6 people out of that dozen. So then what will happen is, you know, we'll go through all the online stuff, and there's the option to give them between like 1 and 5 stars. 5 stars being, this is an awesome candidate, oh, not too bad, and yeah, you know, 1 star might not work out, type of thing. So then the staff will star the director, at least what I do for my positions, I will star or give them a rating, and then ask Susie to call those folks up that have at least a 4 or a 5 star rating, and then she will text them, because that's how everyone likes to be taken care of these days. So she'll text the kids and then set up an interview with me through the kids. And once that's lined up, she'll just say, she'll add it to my schedule, to my calendar, basically. And then when we have enough applicants, or the application deadline has closed, and we feel comfortable with the people that we have out there, then I'll tell Sue, either continue on with it, keep it posted, or now just leave it open-ended until filled, or if we've got enough people right out of the gate, which occasionally happens, not as much as usual, but if we've got enough people, she'll just pull it down so that people can't apply anymore. Does that kind of help you with the process a little bit?
Yes, thank you. So then what happens when you select an employee? You know, who takes the lead on that process? And I realize that this would vary widely depending on whether or not they're a full-time employee versus a part-time, and whether they're going to be a WRS employee. Who then shepherds through that next process of adding them to the system, notifying the state retirement system, making sure they're set up for payroll, direct deposit? Does that fall on department heads, or does that fall under the finance department?
So two different pathways here. One's going to be talked about for part-time people, for seasonals, and the other is going to be full-time. If it's a full-time person, typically the village manager has handled it, and then they will meet with that person along, typically with Greg from finance, and go over all of those things that a full-time person needs to be concerned about, and so they can bring things back to their family and make decisions on insurance and things like that. If it's a part-time person, seasonal person, where they're just maybe being a football official or an umpire or a lifeguard or something like that, that's usually done in-house within our own department. We've got a packet that we give them. They fill that packet out. We get that packet back. We send it over to our finance personnel folk. Angie typically does that under Greg's supervision. And then they onboard that person, get them into iSolve. A lot less needs to be done, obviously, with the seasonal kids versus, you know, the 16-year-old umpire, or the, you know, someone working with a mini basketball program versus a full-time person. So full-time are usually done at a higher level here with the village manager and finance, versus part-time is usually done within our own department by whatever supervisor has that person.
Terry, do you want to add something?
So I worked with Allison and worked with Mary. We have iSolve for payroll, and we have iSolve Hire for hiring. Sorry. I'm yelling at everybody else to do that. So like Rex said, for the village half of it, usually I'll do it. Angie can help with doing the public safety, because that's a little more specialized, but it all pretty much is the same. It's hooked up that way. Once we have to HR fuse them, then it automatically goes to payroll, and then payroll from there will make sure that they have everything signed up for, and then go over like the retirement and life. But the rest is pretty much done computerized, or we call them, or everything can be done either by email or text communication. So everything's in the system there. We know what was said, what wasn't said, what's out there, what they applied for. They can hook up a resume to it. The job descriptions, we can import anyone we want, whichever applies for that position. If there's any type of specialized training or anything, we can add all of that into that. So it's, I don't know if that helps kind of explain how it goes from one or Rex did a great job of explaining it, but I didn't know if you knew that it automatically onboarded to our payroll system.
Thank you, that's helpful. It just seems like, I mean, I know from my role that it's such a difficult hiring landscape, and when you have to post online to get the eyes, but then you get so many unqualified junk applications with that process too, and
you do.
People just don't work as long.
You do. I mean, you know, we posted park maintenance. I'll just, an example, I know we're getting off track a little bit, but we had probably 30 or 40 people apply, and quite honestly, there was maybe 5 people that we were willing to interview, because a lot of times people are just doing it to say they applied somewhere to get their unemployment benefits. So, and that's where then you need to like change tactics a little bit. You still keep that job open, but you start shaking the tree over at the high school with different coaches that especially, the graduating seniors that can work some of the jobs where you're driving a village vehicle or you're using power tools, things like that. And then those coaches have those kids apply. And then, it's kind of like an end around almost, but if you don't, because a lot of times the kids don't know, you can advertise, but unless someone says, hey, you should go work for them, or, that's how you get your employees. It's almost by referral, the good kids anyway.
To get us back on track, the reason I wanted to dive down that path was really just to get a sense of how much of the role that a human resource director is now being put on either the manager or the department heads. And just in my opinion, I don't think that department heads spending their time navigating through these things and spending a lot of time on it is maybe the highest best use for your salaries and your expertise.
Do you want me to answer that?
No, that's rhetorical. I'm really hearing that there's a lot of department head involvement throughout the hiring process, maybe more so than I would have assumed.
Yes and no. Like, for instance, there's 150 people in our department, but we've got an aquatic supervisor that handles all the pool kids, and that handles all the, all of the Ashwaubenon Lake staffing. And then we've got a recreation supervisor that handles the staffing for all of the recreation programs. So that's part of their role. And like I said, I think there needs to be a personal touch with someone that has those connections over at the high school. That's why we feel it's important to do it. Because if we don't do it, and this has happened, I work for the city of Green Bay and I've worked for other municipalities as well. The people that you get are usually the ones that you are shaking the tree for the most part. The majority of them. Some of them will come naturally just off of what's listed online. But if you're looking for your local community kids, from the village of Ashwaubenon that will put a little special effort into it because this is their hometown that you're working for, then I think that needs to be done to some aspect in-house. So, and quite honestly, as a department head, I don't mind doing that because I know that that's going to save me so many issues down the line by having the right people in place.
That makes sense. I guess it's probably very different for a department that's so seasonally heavy, but I guess my big question for everyone, not just your role, would be, are there things you wish you could do in your role that you don't have time to do because you spend so much time on human resource related items? Or are you just superstars and you make it all work and you're doing 1.5 jobs per person?
I like to think we're all superstars, right? Everyone thinks that. I think some of the onboarding process would be nice to give that, and push that out, because Sue does a lot once they're hired, just in terms of, but again, that's the homegrown thing of hey, texting this kid 3 or 4 times, get your paperwork in, if you plan on working tomorrow night, you need your paperwork in today, that type of a thing. And if a human resource person does that, that's awesome. But a lot of times that's going to be done, at least in Park and Recreation, more in-house.
We don't necessarily have that with our full-timers.
No, and
They're
yeah,
adults.
it's again, this is,
So we don't
I'm
have
just
all
talking
that
about part-time.
competition. Yeah.
And that's what for me, and that's what we need to do to get the kids that we need number-wise to apply.
Okay.
Other thoughts or questions on that department?
Well, let me just jump in. Hi, Allison. I'm Greg. We've met, the finance director. So to Rex's point, there is a lot of difference between the seasonal and full-time. Terry and I, one piece, the onboarding piece, I think is a piece where us as now department heads get involved that maybe that should not be. Allison showed us how to do the onboarding for a new employee with a couple public safety officers. She knows that personnel manual inside and out, and so it's a little bit overwhelming for now the next person coming down. Terry and I are just we'll do it, but that's a lot of work. And I know previous employers to me, as you come in and there's typically an HR person that walks you through so many different things, the culture, explains the different departments, walks through, what our mission might be, all those things that come with HR. And I think there's an ease, a comfort level to someone coming in who's new, who's already nervous, and now they're dealing with the big boss if you will, and don't want to make any mistakes on day one. So there's a comfort level from the onboarding perspective, and then also to Doug's point and Rex's point, I've got some sensitive things, and they might just be uncomfortable, and you've got to go to that who's ultimately your boss. I used analogies like the football GM and head coach who has to tell you how great you are, but then not pay you, right? It's that kind of concept that you could see didn't work in the NFL, and most teams went back to two separate roles. As far as the village manager role, I would echo that is the first priority. I tried to sit back and look and determine what were the roles and the link, and it's so interwoven that it's really difficult to write it all down because there's these tangents. So I think of TIF, for example. Well, I get involved with TIF, Aaron gets involved with TIF, and then each of these people get involved in TIF in some other capacity. So you have that village manager who sits on top of all that. And there's economic development, same thing. I might get called in, someone else gets called in. From a budgeting perspective, I like to think I have a little bit different perspective. Each of these people in this room have somewhat of a silo. Their day job is to do public works or park and rec. From a budgeting and finance perspective, I kind of dig into there and I get to learn more how those operations work. And with that village manager role, there's a lot of partnership in that I see numbers, I'm paid to say no, and that person's there to help me explain why I need to say yes and help me understand those different departments. Now I could do that, and I could go sit with Rex, I could sit with Doug, but we're peers. So at some point, there's that guidance, there's that oversight from an operations standpoint and in that perspective. HR I see just be another one of those silos that needs to be separated. And again, that village manager is still going to have input, still going to have a connection there, but there's a point where you step away. And so when there's sensitive information, there's onboarding, all those things that I think HR handles in its truest form would be much more helpful. As far as hiring, for me, our last position was an accountant position, and I had 125 applicants. So I had to read through those. I don't know if that's normal practice. Would it be nice to have someone to kind of weed through that a little bit better? Because so many of them are not qualified, not qualified, not qualified. At least half not qualified. So that's 75 or 70, 60 that I don't even have to look at. So maybe there's value in that process. So I think from a finance perspective, I try to sit and think between Steve and Allison. I can't imagine not having that position there. There's just every day it's something. It's a different topic, a different idea, and to have someone in that position. And specifically in Ashwaubenon, we're pretty complex. I would argue that not only is it we need a village manager, we need a village manager with good experience, because there's a lot of different pieces going on. We have a lot going on in this community. We have ties into the county with the CDA that get involved. There's 3 different TIF districts, and always development coming through the door. So I think it's a pretty complex system that I don't know how we would manage without that position.
Okay. Chief?
Hi, I'm Brian Newell. I'm the new Director of Public Safety. I've been here for, 5 months now, I think. So, I'm not going to say anything different than these guys have already said. I'll echo those same things. I think the village manager is an important position, but I also think the separation of duties is also very important. The conversations that I've had within the department have said the same thing. I think some of their hesitancy was with the village manager and the HR, kind of the same duties. Was there a conflict of interest, and how did that work? And some of their hesitations involved in that. So some of the same things that they were saying as well. As far as the hiring goes for us, we're a little different animal. There's not too many public safety departments around the United States. For hiring for us, we do the iSolved as well. We go through that. We go through, and I have shifted the duties and made promotions within the department, so some other folks are handling it, but I have people assigned to the hiring process itself. And so they will put the applications and information out there. They will run the entire process, which includes the whole hiring aspect of it, which is, we didn't do any testing this time, but we do physical testing, we do interviews, and before that, we go through all the resumes and do the ratings as well, which is something I learned just recently in our last hiring process. I didn't know we had those capabilities, which I thought was very nice because I've never been part of a system like that. So to have that electronically done, which was very helpful. And so once we do that, we kind of work through that process, and then we work with Terry and Angie, who is our confidential secretary, works through all that process itself. So I think it's important for us to still be able to do that just because of the complexity of the applicants, I think, and the positions that we're looking for within the department. The certain skills that we're looking for might be a bit of a challenge for the HR person to do that. Not to say they can't. We just have to be on the same page on what we're looking for to fill those positions. And so we could probably do things that way as well. But I think it is important to have an HR position as well. Again, I echo, how do we do that financially? I'm not sure how that happens, but I think it is important to have those separation of duties. Like Rex, I've been to different agencies. This is the first municipality where I've seen the HR village manager role combined. If there's been a combination, it's been with a different position. Like where I recently came from, it was with the clerk's position. They were also the HR manager for the village. Otherwise, it's been separate. It's been separate duties. So this is the first one where the HR manager was to combine. And it's a little difficult, going in and talking to your boss about your personal, situation. That was a little awkward for me. I didn't really know her that well, but still, it was awkward talking about those things with your boss. And so I can see where there's some hesitation in that, and how would that exactly work going forward. So I can see that. I thought Rex made a great point in that regard. Other than that, any other questions for me in my role?
Would you see HR taking major role in contract negotiations?
HR?
Yeah.
No. I don't think I've had, thinking about the other places that I've been, I don't know that HR has ever done that. It's been more the village manager, village administrator that's been part of that process that I'm used to. But, that's just what I've seen.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of put you on the spot because 2 meetings ago, you had brought forth before this committee a request for some out-of-budget funds to cover training. And I put you on the spot then and asked when the last time a training of that nature had been done, and you said not in recent memory. The message that sent to me is that you have especially in public safety, you have so many required trainings that it leaves so little wiggle room if you want to do anything outside of those requirements. And I'm wondering if you had someone either through the role of village manager, which it doesn't look like in most communities, it involves really prioritizing training and development opportunities for staff that likely just falls on department heads to kind of pick at budget time what they'd like to send their staff toward. I feel like that's kind of a gap. And in hearing what you said 2 meetings ago, it let me know this might be a lot easier to advocate for organization-wide training and development if that lived in human resources rather than falling on the limited budget time, the budget constraints and time constraints of department heads. I feel like you'd have more unilateral training and development across the organization if that was at the top, either under the manager or an HR professional, rather than falling exclusively on a department head.
Yeah, I think that could be a good argument for the village in general. The state of Wisconsin requires a certain number of training hours, especially for law enforcement, for fire, that type of thing. So there are mandatory trainings that we got to have every year, and that would obviously have to be incorporated. But things as the cultural competency that we talked about, that could absolutely be done in that role. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for right now? Tony?
I am Tony Walkwist. I'm the village attorney. Again, as the chief just indicated, I don't think I have anything else that's novel to offer that hasn't been discussed or offered up already. I view my role as a little bit different anyways. It's not that I have a bunch of employees to manage, such as a lot of the other department heads, and I view my role as more of a supportive role to each of the department heads. But again, I'll just say, I'll echo the concerns and issues and points that have been raised by the other department heads tonight. Just a little bit based upon my past experience. This is my first time working with a manager in a role. I previously worked for the city of Green Bay where we did not have one, and but we did have an HR director, and I thought it was a good point at the last meeting when we had a discussion regarding this. A good perspective that an HR director would bring or can offer is almost, I don't want to say an employee advocate, so to speak, but there is an employee relations aspect that comes along with it that I think is goes towards what has been talked about tonight, as far as just people feeling awkward or uncomfortable necessarily talking about health or employment related issues directly with their boss, and the manager having that role. The manager role obviously has been outlined as a good person who operates at that 30,000 foot level and is kind of the coach and oversees everything that's kind of going on, and I think that's a very important role as well, and kind of keeps a pulse on everything and keeps things moving along, and is a good I guess linchpin for all those sorts of things. So those are just kind of some of the thoughts that come to my mind. That's a little bit different than what's been offered up. Otherwise, I certainly join in with what has been echoed by all the other department heads here tonight.
It was suggested that the village attorney take over all HR duties. What do you think of that?
Sure, I'll do whatever I need to do to help, but whatever Terry needs right now, we're just we're making our way through, and I know Greg and his department is working as well. So.
Okay. Mr. Moynihan, you have anything to add?
Not really.
Can you talk a little bit about your position, Pat? I mean, with you, I believe, leaving first of the year, as far as what potential that position has, or what your thoughts are on, I don't know, availability, I guess, to do other tasks, or if it has any availability?
I do whatever it takes to get the job done. I'm Pat Moynihan, the Clerk Treasurer. I guess for the first point, the initial discussion, you're going to have to ask yourself from an HR perspective. If you want division, you're going to have to bite the bullet if you want to fill both positions. And you only have so many dollars there. Just from my little perspective, you're almost better off if you strip the manager of the HR, that job description, there's not a lot left. I'm sure there's things there that aren't noted, but that's something to look at. Or you keep the manager and you contract HR. I don't know if that's feasible, but for what it's worth, I thought I'd just chime in on that. As far as the Clerk Treasurer, we just passed the charter ordinance last night. Finance Director, Finance itself will be absorbing some of those duties. This goes back to the clerk role. If your point, Mr. Chairman, is what can be absorbed in that office, I guess it depends on what that might be. In the even years, elections, that's very time consuming. Odd years, maybe not so much, you can do other things, but again, as you've said many a time, you drive by and I'm sitting there, you can see me working at night. You gotta do what you gotta do to get the job done. We're public servants, so. I'm probably not answering your question, but it's the unknown.
Sure.
It depends on what that item might be, and I can't really speak to that.
I think what's hard about HR is, so many roles in municipalities fit into this neat little calendar. We do the budget in this month. We hire seasonal park employees in this month. We have an election in this month. HR doesn't adhere to a calendar. If somebody has a major crisis come up, we can't be like, well, let's just wait 6 weeks and squeeze that in right after the budget. If it's pressing, it needs to be dealt with now. And with that, I just have a hard time hearing the idea that we try and ask existing employees to absorb any of these responsibilities, which really are critical at the time they come up, and work it in around their already full-time jobs with timelines and demands. And I mean, especially this year with an election that so many people are requesting absentee ballots, the clerk burden is insane this year compared to a normal year. It would be crazy if we had asked you this year as well, not knowing what COVID would bring, to also take on position posting responsibilities or position screening responsibilities.
I know the title is Clerk Treasurer. Can you divide that into how much time you spend on each, if possible?
Well, it's far more from the clerk side of things. You want percentiles? I mean, it's being divided now anyway, being absorbed by finance. I work in concert with the director on a daily basis. I'll do room tax, Brown County room tax, things of that nature, some filings that are required for the state. But a large portion of some of those filings, the finance director likes to handle. We'll work together for on what was the term last night? That's investments. We were here long last night. I'm getting punchy. But most of my time is clerk. Election is foremost. That's probably the most important aspect of the position. There's no mulligans. You got to get it right. There's no gimmies. But you're talking liquor licensing, tobacco. There's a host of things that don't even come to mind right now. You just do them. Today, as an example, I wrote up a press release to send out because we're filling wards 9 and 10 trustee position. There's just these little things, little nuances, but I mean, there's different permitting, different licensing, things of that nature. Operator's license, bartender's license, picnic license, block party permits, you name it, we got the gamut.
Is there anything else anybody wants to add on staff? I mean, we're going to sit down and hopefully do some brainstorming here and trying to throw some things together yet. And I mean, we just want to make sure you get all your points or questions or points of view out there.
The HR thing, the private conversations, it's so specialized. It's always ever changing. Federal law, state law. You really have to have someone in tune. You have to have, if you go just an HR route, they have to have a strong background. I mean, if you go the village manager route, you have to have someone with a strong background. It's ever evolving. That is if you just go singular, but nothing you don't know already.
Sure.
And I guess I need to jump in and say this only because, I mean, you and I have had a couple conversations, in the last hour already just about the hiring process. And I need, personally, I'm speaking for the Park and Recreation Department. I think it's best that our department continues on with that. It's not something, even it would be nice not to have to do it. I think it's best to keep it in-house to do it, at least in our department for the part-time staff, for the seasonal staff. What I see a great need for in a human resource person is once that person's on board, then dealing with all the insurance issues, onboarding the full-time people, and then as issues come up, disagreements, disciplinary things potentially, once they're on board, that's where I see a real value of a human resource person. So, so I don't want to, I didn't want to sound like we wanted to give up the onboarding process, because I think, at least in Park and Recreation, that's important that we're able to do that, because like you said, when something happens, that's what that, like big with a full-time person, that's what that person's going to be focusing on. And then all of a sudden something comes up in Park and Rec, it's like, oh my God, we just had two employees quit, and we've got 30 kids that need a program instructor. They're not going to be worried about that. They're going to be worried about the full-time crew, which is when we go out and shake the trees and get someone onboarded, immediately, with Terry's help and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different again between part-time people and full-time people, but I personally, and in talking with our own full-time staff in the office, everyone's in agreement that, once someone is on board, and they, whether it be insurance questions or whether it, that's the biggest thing for us, for full-time people. It's great to have someone there that can immediately help you out with that and give you some direction.
Can I just ask, and this is a question for everyone, the last time the village engaged in a strategic planning operation, to set goals for the future, who was the driver behind that? Was that the village manager, or was that driven by the board and the president?
I don't know if there's a formal strategic plan that goes in place. I mean, a lot of that is done in-house when we, it's my perspective now, when we go to budget time, then the needs of the community are out there. Things are changing so fast, I mean, and construction going up, and, there's not a lot that, we can put a plan out there on what we want to see, but in the past, we've, park board level, I mean, we do the outdoor corp study and everything, but, and you got a few other studies out there, but the last strategic plan, that's been a few years ago now, hasn't it?
The last strategic plan was implemented or touched off by the village board and the village administrator at that time. We hired a consultant to come in. It was Gianfranco something another, and it was on a Saturday where they had the public come in and we had a full listening session and draw-up session of what was going on. But that was, I want to say that was early to mid 2000s was the last time a full-blown strategic plan was done. There were, as Mark was saying, budget time, court plans, things of that nature. There were more specific, drilled into studies done, but a full listening session, if you will, from the community. That was the last one.
I know in 1997, we did the one with the Oneida tribe and the whole village. We had a couple hundred people there at that time for sure. But I don't remember a formal one after that.
Well, I won't tell you what grade I was in 1997. But just to be clear, when I say strategic plan, I don't mean a 1-year budget document or a 3-year capital improvement plan. I'm really thinking big picture, something that I'd really like to see the next village administrator or manager take on would be really engaging the public and staff and leading them through a mission-driven document of not just what services do we provide, but what mission and values do we serve and provide this community, and how do we make ourselves both a community of choice for investment and employment, but also a destination where people want to live. When I look at the municipal landscape and see the strongest communities that have the highest competition for employees, the strongest housing markets, they have those guiding documents and they are implemented by the board and by the department heads. They're used to support those budgetary decisions year over year. We'll ask ourselves, is this in line with our strategic plan? And it's not so specific. It's more vague mission driven, big picture, but I do see those as being a common denominator among some of the IT communities, if you will, where people would kill to work and want to have their dollars invested. And I think we're on the cusp of that, but I think that really making long-range planning and implementing a mission and vision with our staff is key to becoming that community.
I sit on the Planning Commission, and the Brown County Planning Commission is going through the comprehensive plan revision right now for the entire county, and each one of the municipalities municipalities are included in that. And we've been using the zoning code as an on-the-run planning document with all the development that's gone on since I've been on the board in the last almost 8 years now. So the structure is there. We have a vision and a direction of what we want to see. But being a professional planner for years and years, that detail changes the minute that document is published and made copies of. So yeah, there is structure there is long-term planning, but it's also got to be flexible at the same time. You know?
When is the last time we did one? I mean, it seems like the last one, the real plan was when we were looking at this area over here, you know, between Titletown and Entertainment District. Walkway was included in that,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. I mean, what year was that? I can't even remember what year that was.
Probably around 7 or 8.
At least.
No, that's what I remember, the walkway and things like that. 2005.
Yeah, I think it's like 2005, 6 is right before I started here, because I remember the pedestrian boulevard that was going to cut through.
Right.
Yeah.
I just, all jokes aside, I think 23 years since the last strategic plan is a little too long. And I know that it is a market, that there are a lot of really glitzy, expensive consultants that engage it, but there are far cheaper options and partners, both within the university system and the technical college system and the extension system that support that kind of planning. I'd really like to see that be a key part of the manager role, would be to really drive a mission-driven planning exercise for the community to ensure that we remain an incredibly strong community for investment and for employment attraction.
As unique a circumstance as Brown County Planning Commission is, being it's a one-county planning commission, it's head and shoulders above at least one of the planning commissions that I ever worked for. So the quality of the process, but you've got to get in line for that too. You know, and this is not something I can say next Wednesday at the meeting, oh, we want a strategic plan, can you have it done by Saturday? You know, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
We've done, and I think some departments have done this kind of on their own almost, but like I'll take Parks, Recreation, and Forestry. Per DNR guidelines, you have to have a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, and that needs to be done every 7 years, I believe it is, to be eligible to apply for DNR grants. And so I know we've done that. We've scheduled 7 different community meetings at different neighborhood parks, and then opened it up as a whole here, you know, for the park board. Got people's ideas of what they wanted, what's missing, what park amenities are they looking for, what direction they would like to see us do programming in. Then we've put that together. We've just done it in-house, because I think it was done initially a longer time ago by a consultant, and it's kind of like, well, we can do that in-house on our own thing, and it takes a little bit of time, as Mike was saying. Mark, I mean, when from start to end, probably 7 to 9 months was the full process to do that. But it's not that nothing is being done, you know, but I think that there's pieces being done as departments need them to be done to give that direction and get that feedback from the public to move forward. Just maybe not as a full unit, you know what I mean?
Anybody else have anything from staff? I mean, if you want to stick around, I mean, you're more than welcome, I guess, but it's entirely up to you.
10:15 was long enough for me last night.
Yeah. As we go through this, if you see what we're producing, if you want to chime in or give us an opinion, please do so. You know, we're trying to fast track this, but we're not really fast tracking it, but we're just trying to get things out there so we can get somebody put in the positions.
Thanks for allowing us to speak.
Yep. Okay. Well, we heard from staff, a lot of different information. We got a lot of job descriptions here.
Grandkids.
Let's,
Sorry, I'm handing these up.
no problem.
I'm promoting my program.
Last time we got one of
Thank
these,
you.
somebody resigned.
Wow. Well, what are your thoughts? I mean, I want to hear from you and see what you think.
A couple things that I heard. Number one, it seems like the village manager is number one, and the word I kept hearing was awkward. Everybody said awkward, which means they can't talk to the manager, which I would think it'd be tough to talk to the village manager or your supervisor about a personal issue. Having talked to HR people, it's a buffer in between, so that's kind of what I'm hearing.
Sure. I think if I agree. I mean, it sounds like, and I never thought of it that way, but you're talking directly to your boss about personal issues and stuff like that. I think that this is just my opinion right now. I think what I think we should do is take the village manager position and take out what we think was the HR position out of it and see what it looks like. Is that enough on the plate for that one person, or is it too much yet, or not? And if we take and try to create the HR position and what we want that HR position to do, we can then have a basis for if we are going to contract for it or if we're going to hire an independent person for it. I mean, I think that's what we have to determine by setting what expectations we want that position to do. It was brought up a couple different ways by hiring somebody in for it or contracted services, but we have to determine what we want that HR position to do first.
When I look at, and sorry, I keep referring back to my own document, I'm just very proud of it, but I broke down 10 roles and responsibilities within each position. And I think I missed one. Based on what staff shared tonight, I think that employee onboarding should be separate from the hiring and recruiting, because it sounds like many of the department heads have really found a way to make the hiring and recruiting process work well for them with the assistance of capable administrative support staff, and have figured out a way to make it work. And in the case of Parks and Rec, they don't really want to see that part of their role be outsourced. They like having their hand in that process.
So let's stop right there for just a second. When you say onboarding, now, is onboarding the hiring process, or is onboarding the process internally to get them in the systems and all the other stuff that's associated with it?
I think it's post accepting an offer and within the week before and first few weeks when they start. It's everything from getting them into the system for retirement, insurance, et cetera, some of which happens before they start, some of it happens after they start. It sounds like finance plays an active role in that now, but then also ensuring that they understand the personnel manual, that they understand just the ins and outs of how to work here. I'm sure there are social media use policies governing using city technology. Somebody that would walk them through those perhaps ever-changing policies and manuals and ensuring that a new employee firmly understands
So
the rules of
onboarding is
working here.
policies, manuals, and
Yes.
instruction, if you will, the new hiring process and what we expect of them.
Yeah.
If it's okay, I don't know if I'll be able to stay the entire meeting,
Tell them who you are.
but most of you know me. My name's Allison Williams. I'm the trustee for Wards 1 and 2, but I am an HR generalist, so that is what I do for my career. As we're talking, I'm entering payroll and processing COVID pay right now, so it is a lot. But I wanted to try to make it here so I could listen to what the department heads wanted. And I do think that manager position is very important. And knowing that they're so intertwined, would I potentially see this position possibly being is more of an HR generalist type of position, but a very higher level HR generalist type of position. That might be a little bit more budget friendly for us right now, and kind of see how it evolves into maybe more of a manager position. But my previous job, I was an HR department of 1. They did not have HR prior to me, and I created a department. My current position, I do the generalist work for a manufacturing facility, union, non-union, the whole 9 yards. Onboarding to me too, but I have a million thoughts going through my head that I'm trying to get out. It is the post offer, but listening to what Rex had to say, and then also listening to what Greg had to say, I think there needs to be a middle ground. I think HR can be involved, and I know Rex seemed very protective of his hiring. But what a lot of people, especially someone here who, if you don't have HR, you don't know, multiple people can be in that position. So in a case where maybe Rex doesn't have time to get to it, okay, HR goes in, processes the applications. Rex can also have the ability, though, to pop in, get who he needs, onboard them. In Greg's position, he told me he had 125 applications for an accounting position, and one of them was a baker. In that type of position, what my role would be, and what it is currently, is I weed out that. I go through and I look at all 125, and I forward the 30 that are worth Greg's time to look at. He tells me the 10 he wants to interview, and I arrange that. Then we go through the interview process, we do the offer. From that point forward, and obviously given that we have a lot of different admins and stuff, you get them in the door, but the onboarding is going through the benefits, making sure they understand. But in my role, I also make sure they have if they have a probationary period, do they have a check-in at 30 or 45 days? How are they feeling? At 90 days, how are you feeling? So that's my responsibility to tell the manager, and in a perfect world, the manager remembers to do all that, but it doesn't happen. So it's my responsibility to make sure those mid-probation or end of probation 30, 90-day reviews are getting done, so that employee, if things do come up, knows they can talk to their manager, and they also get a sense for how they're performing in their job. A generalist role is also someone not just hiring. I do all the benefit administration at my facility. I know if I don't, I know who to contact. I do all the benefit enrollment. I can answer all the benefit questions. I'm currently involved in negotiations. Union negotiations and public negotiations are a little different than what I'm in. I could see a generalist staying out of this. I could see the manager and Tony handling negotiations with the chief or something like that. I think that would be understandable. But I do short-term disability. I do FMLA. I handle harassment claims, investigations, COVID, all of that stuff. That's all doable at a generalist level. And to give you an idea of the generalist we'd probably be looking at is probably in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. That, I would say in there you could probably get a really qualified generalist that can do most of those things. And that gives you the flexibility for them to get their feet wet, develop a position. It's gonna take 6 months to really make any change anyway, to be completely honest. And if it develops into a manager or a director role, you take it that route when the time comes. But with the manager being there, I'm a little hesitant because the manager is so involved at having a director of HR. Because if we have a director of HR that has a master's, has their SURE-MSP or a CP, all that stuff, I mean, you're looking at 6 figures, easily. So that's where I think we might be a good starting place. And also, just a side note, most of the stuff that Patrick mentioned, I would have absolutely no idea how to do. So could an HR person learn how to do the clerk's job? I'm sure they are fully capable, but almost everything that he mentioned, I've never had any training on. It's never in any of my seminars, my conferences, anything of that nature, to know or have any idea what to do what Pat just mentioned. So could I probably learn it? Yes, I think I could. but that's not a typical thing you learn about in HR. So I will continue to hang out in the back for as long as I can, but I just wanted to get all that out there since my brain was going a million miles a minute.
And I think you actually summarized like the exact elements that we currently have under the village manager's job description: the personnel policy management, negotiation, insurance benefit management. Sounds like negotiation, Allison would advocate that that stay under the manager, but that if we could remove the policy, personnel policy, and the benefits administration, those do likely seem like the two areas where department heads described awkward encounters. Do you think that this, in your expertise as someone working in this profession, do you think this needs to be a full-time role? Or do you think there's an opportunity to make this maybe a 3/4 or 0.5 FTE?
I struggle with that. I personally would say full-time. I've never worked in a part-time HR role, but I guess I struggle with, like you said, HR, it happens when it happens, you know? You never know when you're gonna get called. You never know when someone's gonna file a harassment claim or this or that.
You have 110 full-time employees, and seasonal, you're up 200 plus, 250.
Yeah, and I think I had mentioned at a different meeting, I can't remember what, industry standard is about 1 HR professional to about 100 full-time employees. So we're right at that threshold. I can tell you my facility has 600 and we have 3. So we're a 1 to 200 ratio. In the summer, I hire close to 60 to 70 part-time, so that puts us up to about 650. I think we could maybe use one more at my facility. But I think you'd have enough, and I think the complexity of a public entity would provide the work. And I think as much as like Rex or something like that would want to maintain their part-time, control, I guarantee you if someone's gonna help him push the paperwork, he's not gonna say no. Maybe you say the yes to the person, but if I can do an onboarding for you, I'll do it. And that's what I used to do previously. I screened the applicants, the manager interviewed them, told me who they were hiring and what their start date was. I would go to their facility and onboard them. So they had full control. I just did the onboarding. Now in a pinch, could the manager do it? Yes, but it was my way to expose myself to them, to know that you have, like a Parky, for example, they only know Rex. If they all of a sudden have an interaction with I don't want to say a parent, but maybe another employee or something, or maybe Rex himself, they don't know anyone else to reach out to. You can say, you can talk to Mary, me, you can name off all the people, but having another face is always beneficial. And so that's why if I had the time in my day, I would go to that facility and I would onboard them. So I think it can be both ways. I think Rex can do some of it. I think HR can do some of it. But like I said, they have full control, but we're just the help. We're the mechanics behind it. They decide, And like I said, I've done that, so.
What's the approximate salary of a generalist, HR generalist like you're talking about?
60 to 75, I'd say. Maybe as high as 80. I know some ranges can go anywhere from 70 to 100 for a generalist still. But the hard part about HR is there are so many different titles for what you can call your HR person. If I would have stayed at my previous organization, my title would have been HR assistant, but I was still doing everything that a generalist would do. So that's the hard part, is when you do market research, you don't know if you're looking at an assistant, an associate, an analyst, a generalist, a manager, and they all could be doing the same thing, and there's 6 different titles for it. That's the hard part. But I would say starting this, I wouldn't feel comfortable starting an HR person if we have them doing what we just kind of all mentioned more than 75.
And I hate to like advocate against higher salaries for public employees since I am one, but I think that the state retirement system and health insurance are a carrot that you can attract a qualified individual that really wants those benefits. And just some of the benefits that come with longevity in the public sector too. I mean, I know a lot of my peers that work below their market rate in the private sector because the health insurance, especially with the cost of health nowadays, is really worth a less take-home pay. I mean, it's that comprehensive package we have to remember.
I would say too, so I keep, again, referring to myself, but so my previous position before I took what I was hired as an HR generalist. I got in the door, I started doing what I was doing, evaluating 6 months, a year in. I had created systems, processes, handbooks, policies. I had done all of this. And my role had, because I had trained people on what is HR, how do you properly handle things, what do you do? My position turned into a little bit more of a manager role. And so after about a year and a half, they recognized that, and my salary was increased at that time to more reflect what the role has evolved into. And that's where I guess I'm a little hesitant coming right out of the gate saying we're gonna hire a director when we don't know if we have director level responsibilities for them to do yet. We don't know how that's going to go. And it might be unfortunate for the person that comes in. Hopefully we hire a qualified enough candidate that if this position does evolve, we could just honor that person and change their title and potentially increase their pay. But if they don't, it might have to be a discussion about, okay, we need a higher level candidate. Or you continue with the person that you have, and then when the person leaves, you look at upgrading that position. But I guess that's where I'm a little hesitant. Part of me would rather have a lower level full-time position versus a part-time position. Full-time, your employees see you all the time. Door open policy, they can come to you whenever you want. You are always here. You know, you have that rapport with them. So I'd rather see a lower salaried constant for the village versus contract. Now I get if we have to do contract in the meantime for budgetary purposes, I understand that. But if they're here every Tuesday, Wednesday, and on every Tuesday someone goes to the admin office, they might know, oh, they're going to talk to HR. Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble today, you know, whatever it may be. I think it's doable. I don't know. I guess I've never seen contracted HR in any of my experience. Not saying it's not doable, I've just never seen how it works in a business.
Can someone enlighten me how much additional cost this above salary, like the benefits cost, is like an extra 25%, 30%, 40%? Anybody have that number?
I'm pretty sure Greg said about half, about 49, 50%. So if you hire someone at 60,000, you're looking at more of a $90,000 cost.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And that's probably assuming like a worst, air quotes, worst case scenario where they have a family on the insurance plan.
No.
I just wanted to make one point. There was an article that somebody brought me up, over a year ago about village manager. It was in a paper. And I thought they did a great job explaining the role of a village manager. And the village manager supervises the department heads and makes sure that all things that need doing in the village are carried out by law. They follow the policies to the T to make sure that all legalities are taken care of. Where the elected officials are often spending more time in the community, and the manager makes sure that there are no politics in the policy. So I thought that was a great analogy as to why, especially with the size of our village, why years ago, you know, Ted Pampern was a full-time president, and he did everything, versus now why we have the administrative/manager position. So I just thought, just so you know that.
And I would say one thing too, just because I know how to do all those things that I mentioned, I also set up conference rooms if I have to, because it's not done. I organize employee socials. I do whatever gets thrown my way because that's what my boss says I have to do. So just because, you know, you have all these higher level things, if you start on the lower end, I'm thinking as far as time goes, we're not sure if we have full-time work for this person. I'm pretty sure we could probably find full-time work for this person. I would feel, whether that's helping out Tony's secretary, entering in all the part-time employees into the system, which would probably be more accurate for an HR person to do. Whether it be knowing some of the clerk duties, whether it be backing up someone when they're on vacation, you know, knowing more things. I think having, there's no, I don't know, just hearing how segregated everything is. Terry does this, Beth does this, this does this, this does this. I feel like those people should be more of the backups to HR versus HR, you know, HR being segregated into 5 people.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I've talked a lot. You can talk, Chris.
Yeah, but yours is really good. After listening to everybody so far, especially the department heads, what I got out of it, when Doug started out, village manager 1, HR 1A, everybody seemed to follow suit, kind of, more or less. A lot of it was obviously insurance, which is complex, always changing. A lot of the common themes were hard to talk to village managers because they're your boss. Time constraints for the village manager. Greg was the only one that did not mention really HR, which is understandable because he's got a lot of dollar signs floating around. And although he had a great analogy between a GM and a head coach. You got the one that'll lift you up, and the other one that'll tell you what you're doing wrong. Brian Chief brought up awkward talking to the boss. Tony made a good point, good employee relationships with an HR manager. Patrick, HR is so specialized. A village manager would need to be, again, really well-rounded, and that's gonna come at a cost. The way the budget's gonna go, and I get it, Allison, we can always find a full-time things to do for an HR person, but budget-wise, it's gonna be tough to make that one fly. I think Doug Martin brought up a good, even if we had somebody here 2 days a week, at least employees would know that somebody on a given, 1 or 2 or 3 days a week would be here. And that's probably throughout my mind right now that we probably should look towards is going with, working towards the future for full-time. I think we need it. But budgetarily right now, I think going with contracting somebody out probably would be the feasible way to go right now, but we need to, I think we do need both positions.
Chris, I mean, I agree with you to some degree. I think that what we should do, or try to do, is separate those positions out. So we got the job description of what we want the HR person or service to do, and see what it costs. You know, go to, get a couple quotes from some HR companies that are out there, and if it comes in as what a full-time employee cost, I think our better long-term and solution and best for the community is a full-time employee.
Immediately, you're saying?
Well, if it's close, I mean, those guys aren't cheap. I mean, I've seen some of them that come in the door by me and everything, because I'm a really small employer.
Yeah.
And it's not cheap.
If I could just jump in on that point, I did contact a local HR consulting company, and just to kind of give you an idea, the rates, there's the kind of the head executive HR consultant charges at $220 an hour. Senior HR consultant is $170 an hour, and HR consultant is $125 an hour. Administrative support is $60 an hour. And so they would bill, generally, they could put together some sort of proposal. What was indicated is that they generally would would bill kind of like a law firm or accounting firm on an hourly basis. So it is a little bit spendy. So just to kind of give you an idea, that is one example that I was able to find in the past couple of weeks.
I just did some quick math on that at the $220 an hour. If we were looking at a $60,000 salary and not incorporating benefits, that's 5.24 hours a week.
If you take the senior HR specialist that you mentioned at 170 times 16.
Patrick, can you give her a mic, Pat? Sorry.
Did you just get
So I took the 170 rate, I think the one down from the executive, and if we say 2 days a week, 16 hours a week, you take 170 times 16 times 52 weeks in a year, that comes out to $141,000. That's for the senior executive HRs, the second one down. So now
at
doesn't
16,
mean,
you said it's 16 hours a week?
yeah, if you did 2 days, I mean, you think 2 8-hour days that they're here. So 16 hours a week. Now that's also assuming we don't need them at maybe 52 weeks.
But if we come up with the responsibilities of what we want HR to do, and you give it to a firm like that, you're not going to have a senior HR guy doing data entry. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe they have different rates for different people too. Well, they do.
I've got a question. Maybe this is more of a Tony question. So in thinking about creating a new position and thinking about the budget ramifications, particularly knowing that there's likely going to be some budget hurdles this year, I'm trying to think about where else are we spending money presently on human resource related topics that we might not have to spend it. And this is a huge what if, but do we think if we treated an HR generalist as sort of preventative maintenance, you know, kind of like going to your doctor regularly, just for your checkup, even when you don't feel sick, could we avoid those HR emergency room expenditures, i.e. our contracted services with Von Briesen, with Attorney Macy, when we have emergency situations? It's hard because there's not that many of them to look back at, but do we think that having an HR generalist on staff for 100-something thousand a year, we would prevent these, some or all of these emergency situations where we have to bring in the big guns for $250,000?
I think there would be some benefit to that. I do. Now, how to quantify that is a complicated question, I would say, given kind of where things have been at recently, and how things will be addressed and how that will be worked through going forward. But I think there would be a benefit to that.
Do we know roughly how much we've spent with Von Briesen in like the last 5 years, ballpark?
I would say it's been less since so my position was created as an in-house position about a little over 3 years ago. And so I think that has greatly reduced the need for that, and I do have somewhat of an HR background as well. So there are grievances, litigation matters that, HR-related matters that I have handled on behalf of the village that have reduced that. So there was an arbitration a few years ago that involved Von Briesen, and then kind of the more recent matters. And other than that, that's really been their only involvement since I've been here about the last 3.5 years. Prior to that, it was my understanding that I believe Von Briesen did the labor negotiations and grievances and all those HR-related matters.
Do we have a sense, though, of a dollar amount we've spent in recent years?
I would say more recently, I'm trying to recall what the past arbitration was, but I would say it's going to be no more than $50,000 probably. Probably, if I had to ballpark it, 40 to 50.
This year?
No, not this year, total in the last 5 years.
But part of that is his, I mean, he got his salary that's encompassing some of that too.
Right.
With considering an HR person, how is that going to affect what we budget for a village manager?
and/or other position. Like the clerk, if that salary would be the same now, even though the duties have changed?
Well, we're going to hire somebody to fill the clerk's position,
Right.
so you're going to have the salary there no matter what.
Right.
Right now, this year, with Allison resigning, we have the savings of her salary this year, right now, but you're still going to have that same position next year.
Right.
With the same benefit levels, most likely.
Greg and I have talked about the salary range. We haven't really pinpointed what the salary range would be. It could probably go down from possibly the current salary for the clerk, just because the treasurer portion of it is being taken away. So I'm just off the top of my head, the salary range might go from 60 to 70 for that clerk position. But you're still going to have that, and then the clerk does have medical benefits and stuff like that. So you'll have that yet because there'll be an employee.
So there's not much,
But there might be some potential saving.
not that much.
I'm going to say
Okay, if there isn't, then
possibly 5,000, probably tops. If you could even, I don't know what the person who's going to apply for it, I don't know what the qualifications are going to be. You know, if you have better qualifications, you're going to have to pay on the upper end of the scale, so. No. I'm just saying of the, say if you got somebody who applied who's got 1 year experience versus someone who's got 12, So you're still going to have that expense. I'm sure that, you could have some savings on the village manager's side if you peel away the HR, but I don't know that you're going to have enough to do full-time. So I don't know what that's going to be.
And regardless, if you peel those responsibilities away from the manager, they still exist. Somebody's going to have to try and deal with that.
Right.
And the way our budget is shaping up, to me, the only thing that we can actually afford is to try and find a good manager with the experience level that Allison had, and try to spin off over time the HR stuff. That's the reality of the budget. And like Greg said last night, who knows what next year and the following year are gonna do. Right.
So which way do you want to go here? I mean, do we want to look at these job descriptions and take some of that stuff away, have them rewritten and bring it back to us next meeting and, see if we can finalize that, then we can go forward and check out other options, or where do you want to go? I mean, I'm here to listen for you right now.
I did a synopsis of an HR position that I think might fit the village, and I had Terry print that. It's in the packet. But I do think we need to move forward on the manager administrator as fast as we possibly can, because it's still going to be, 1 month for recruiting responses. You're probably looking at October before somebody competent gets hired.
It's going to be longer than that.
Yeah, well, I agree. I think the HR manager, to peel that stuff off and move it off into the future is a good idea. But like I said, right now, whoever comes in as village manager is going to have at least some of that HR experience for some basic continuity. And you won't find that out until you have resumes and interviews.
You could even put that in the position description. It could be stated as a responsibility of the village manager. One of the short-term goals is to identify restructuring and responsibilities under recent position divisions and new position creation. Specifically, well, it sounds like the charter ordinances are really already guided the clerk and treasurer separation, but you could seek out someone intentionally who has experience in organizational restructuring.
Yeah, I think that's part of what has to happen.
My question is, do you have to pay a village manager who doesn't do the HR stuff more or less than the village manager who doesn't do it? I would think you got to pay him a lot more.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
not to be provocative, but the city of Green Bay doesn't have a city administrator. If it's coming down to one role, just as a citizen of Ashwaubenon, I'd go the HR route, because whoever is the president steers that ship. And if, like we talked about before, if you pull all that HR out of that role, there's not a lot in that job description. Now, granted, it's a part-time job, but the president's here 5 days a week and still doing her role on the weekends in the community. But Green Bay's a lot bigger than us, and they don't have a manager or administrator. Maybe you pay that HR person appropriately.
Isn't,
Because what do you have left in that manager role if you strip all of that? I mean, you're talking about state, federal communications, to ensure trustees have that information, to the community has that information. It's not PR, and I'm not besmirching the previous manager or the previous administrator, but you're looking for coordination. That's the role of the leader of the community, from my perspective.
isn't that on staff, an uncertainty to who your boss is going to be every 3 years?
That action, oh, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, you have that
No,
state
but-
level, federal level.
Yeah.
You know, that, if, the one department head that wasn't here tonight because he's on vacation is Aaron Schutte. And that is the thing that he said in his email, is that the village president could literally change every 3 years. And you could end up with someone that got elected who comes in here once a week. You don't have control, and the staff, the department heads that I talk to, they like the continuity of having someone who knows everything that's going on in the entire village. And to help them to coordinate, and just to go into the office and talk to them about, hey, what do you think about this? And they go, no, why don't we try this? Well, Park and Rec is doing this. And that's that person, they called it an air traffic controller. It's the air traffic controller that keeps everything running smooth. Mark and I had talked too about, as the village president, go back to full-time and you hire a HR person. But to keep, we're not a little town anymore that's, got a couple schools in it and 17,000 residents. We are a very large entity at 2.4 or 2.6 billion dollars. So that position, like I said, it was loud and clear to me that the staff really would like that position, the continuity.
And just to kind of piggyback off that, I'm probably going to have to head out here shortly. I know we're concerned that when you strip out all of the HR, what is the village manager going to do? But think about the CEO of any company. That's basically what a village manager is. A CEO isn't paper pushing. A CEO isn't entering stuff, They're answering emails. They're air traffic controlling. They're going to sitting in 8 hours of meetings a day. They're making the hard decisions, and they're advising their people in what to do. So you could say, what does a CEO do all day? Because they don't do half the stuff. They don't do HR stuff. They don't, You know, I understand the concern of stripping out an HR and what is that person gonna do all day? I looked at Allison's position and I said, how in the world does she have time to do HR stuff given everything else that is going on? You as an employee, you need someone to go to. Aaron had Allison to go to. Doug had Allison to go to. Greg had Allison to go to. HR would have a village manager to go to. You need that backup person who's going to sit in the meetings with you, who's going to help you make the hard decisions. So I understand substantially you could say, what is the village manager going to do all day? The village manager is going to be sitting in 8 to 10 hours of meetings, whether it be HR related or developmental related, and helping guide the community in the way it's going to go. I look at that. I look at my CEO, you can't get a meeting in because they sit in meetings all day, but that's what they do.
I agree 100%, and to apply it to the public sector, I've worked in different municipalities, both those with administrators, those with strong mayors, like the Green Bay example. I find that lack of continuity can be very daunting for employees. That is a benefit of administrators. You never know if they're gonna leave in a few years. That's always a possibility, but the permanency, I think, affects their decision-making. I work in a municipality right now where our executive changes potentially every 2 years with the election. It's very unstable. Our agenda is largely driven by citizen complaints and political agendas that informed the last election. It's very frustrating because you can't always work effectively or do the right thing. You have to do the politically smart thing. And I think the big difference between an elected official and appointed official, when I look at an administrator/manager role, the village president serves the people who elected them. The village administrator/manager serves the board. And it's very different when you answer to, when you remove the public necessarily, when it's not a popularity contest. You're very lucky and fortunate to have elected officials that understand public administration. Not every community is. Some communities end up with whoever was most popular in high school and isn't really savvy on public administration. And that's a risk you don't want to take as a municipality.
I worked on a whole bunch of Indian reservations that some of them changed each year. So you're right about the consistency. The village manager needs to be the driving force behind what you talked about earlier, is the strategic plan and keeping that focused on the horizon of that's where we want to go. And we've got that with our TIF districts here to a large extent, to the industrial parks, to the residential development. That's not something that Ashwaubenon has had to struggle with. It's just been part of the community over time, the way that people work together here.
That was going to be my question before Allison grabbed the mic, and I'm glad you brought those points up. Who's taking that response? How's that split up now, Mary? And then say we go in the future and we kind of cut out a lot of what a village manager does, or eliminate that position, which I don't think we'd do. Where would that get split up?
Well, like right now, you know, since Allison resigned, Terry and Greg have taken on a lot of the HR insurance stuff. Tony's taken on some of the HR stuff. He's, of course, our legal department. The other department heads have all taken on what they can. And I think sometimes, like I said before, it's somebody for them to go into and say, hey, we're going to do this. How do you feel about that? And it's a person there to help, to sit through the meetings, to help you make the decision that you need to make.
But I guess I mean more specifically developmental, land purchases, negotiating, you know, contracts, land purchases, TIFs, incentives, TIFs, things like that. Where is that being split up now?
Between Aaron and Tony, that the majority of that. And then if it has anything to do with TIF, of course, it goes to finance and, you
But
know.
that's not something we really want to look at going forward. I mean, keeping it there.
No, I think that our department heads have enough to deal with, that they're doing it right now to get by until we get somebody. And that is why they sent such a strong message that they would like a village manager.
Yeah. That's one thing. I really admired the job Allison did on that front for sure, was the helping guide the community through the development, things like that, and keeping us informed on the board and giving us our options, saying where you want to go. I think she did a really good job of that.
Yeah.
So where do we want to go here from here? Do we, are you guys in favor of taking that HR position out of the village manager and creating that position, those responsibilities? Excuse me. And if we got those responsibilities down, checking with the private sector to see if there's somebody that would would contract for that and what kind of cost that is associated with it. And when we get those costs, we can always go back to, look at either hiring it or postponing it. Or, I mean, we gotta make.
Well, I think it's a step.
I think it's
At least we get it going.
Step two, but I think we need to start recruiting for a village manager / administrator as soon as possible.
So we need to create that village manager job description then, so that'll direct us what we're looking for.
I think the one
Yes.
we have is pretty good. Or you call it a village HR manager with strong economic development background. And
Well,
see
if you go to the job description of the village manager, everybody should have a copy of it. The second page, section C, touches on human resources. And I know in section 4, paragraph D, it touches on human resources, but that's general knowledge. It's not saying that they need anything else in there. Would you want your village manager to have general knowledge anyways of some of those things?
Right.
I don't know if you need to eliminate them or not.
I don't think they need to be eliminated. Because you're right, you're looking for someone with general knowledge in that.
Is everybody okay with that?
I'm okay with that, but I would say I'd like to see section C reworded, because the way it's worded right now implies that those responsibilities will be a part of the role permanently. Wordsmithed to highlight that one of the key roles for the village manager will be the restructuring of the human resource roles and taking on personnel policy and labor contracting in the interim until that position is restructured.
Yeah.
Mary, are you comfortable with this job description? Is that pretty much what Allison did? I mean, it's 2010, so it's, 10 years old. Is that still valid?
Yeah, I mean, this is what she did. The human resources, the human resources part of it, if you take away the insurance and the importing of the insurance or an importing of the employees, I think that you end up with a lot of the budgetary helps with, keeps the department heads moving in the right direction. The labor negotiation, the only labor negotiation that we have is with public safety. And Tony, is now on board as the attorney. So, they would have to be part of that negotiation, I'm sure, but, and then it shows that she didn't do performance evaluations, but she did do the performance evaluations of the department heads. So I'm okay with the job description. The HR part of it, as far as the person that an employee would go to when there is an issue, I think needs to be stripped away from that manager position. That is a very strong message. So like Tony said before, that a HR person is more of an employee advocate than,
Mary, who are we going to give it to? I mean, they have to have some human that, what you just said, I get it, and I agree with the concept, but if that person, let's just say we pick Terry to do that,
okay?
because she's sitting right next to me.
I'm listening.
You got the village manager doing this, and if they have a personnel issue, they got to go to Terry. That doesn't have any supervisory oversight of that employee at all? I mean, is that who you want them to go to?
No, I'm saying that then we would have to have if we don't hire a part-time HR person or share an HR person with somebody, I don't think it can be the village manager.
Okay, so Allison's suggestion of putting that statement that you just read in there, having that village manager create that, I don't know how would.
Yeah, I think that in the short term, unfortunately, the new village manager this year will have to be that person employees go to, but it can be made very clear in the position description that one of their key goals and key performance indicators will be the responsibility to help restructure that role. And I think with that, this just popped into my head, I think if we could add like lean certification as a potential added skill, that'd be very helpful, because someone with lean certification will be able to kind of take a 30,000 foot level look at roles, responsibilities, cross-training, gaps in cross-training, and find inefficiencies that we have that could maybe long-term be transitioned, especially if we're already in the process of restructuring 2 roles, looking at adding potentially a 3rd. Now's the time to do it.
Right. I agree with that.
So I think that employee touch point, the village manager is going to have to be that in the short term until they effectively restructure. But I think that we'd be remiss to not have the new manager be involved in that process.
Right. But long term, we can't have the village manager be the HR person anymore.
Right. Well,
And we ran into that same problem when I talked to staff who was here back when Steve Kabaki was here. It was the same thing. They don't like having the administrator as the.
I agree, but I agree 100% with this. Right now, we have to get the village manager on board, and why don't we get the village manager hired and give that as a number 1 priority of restructuring an HR department?
Right.
I mean, why should we reinvent the wheel here?
Right.
So is it just that wording that you just said as far as restructuring, responsible for restructuring the HR area or something to that effect, in addition to C, or would you just put that at under G, miscellaneous?
I would actually modify C, because what if you have a great candidate who's like, oh my God, I'm so experienced in municipal administration, but you know what I don't want to go back to doing? HR. And they just skim past this. I think we want to be really transparent and upfront and say, in the interim, this role will incorporate human resources, personnel, and labor. Long term, or not even long term, in the near short term, the goal is to restructure this, and we are seeking a candidate with experience in municipal organizational restructuring.
Put that right in the job description?
I mean, tell people what you're looking for, because then you'll get, maybe then someone will bring up in their cover letter and say, I actually worked for this organization and we restructured XYZ departments. That's the person we want. So tell them what we want so they can come to us and tell us their skill set in that.
And one thing too, I mean, you can put it under, you don't necessarily have to put it under requirements. You can even put it in the intro before you say like job duties. You know, you can structure a posting pretty much however you want. So you have your requirements, you have your job duties, if this isn't going to be a long-term job duty, you don't put it in the job duties, just put it right up in the front, you know, or intro into the job duty. So, yeah, I would do exactly what she just said, is you put it in there.
Okay, so the process we want to use, do we want to get this job description and reword it the way that we want it, to propose it to the village board? It has to go through the village board, so I mean, we're not doing the job posting yet, we're getting the job description done so that we can get the approval to move things forward. So, I'm gonna ask Tony, do you have enough information of what was just discussed to create what we said?
Yes.
Or Terry? Or what? So at our next meeting, we can bring it back and approve that so that we can fast track this, you know, as fast as we can?
Do we need to approve it again, or can our directive be to direct the attorney to,
I want to make sure that it's what we want.
okay. Just trying to think how to make this fast, because municipal hiring is never fast.
Now, we have our next meeting is August 18th, that if we approve it, that we can go to the village board and say, you know, this is what we approved from the finance and personnel. This is our recommendation. Our next step is, once this is approved, then we can move forward and post the position.
Start recruiting, yeah.
Can the board approve the position description and authorize posting at the same meeting?
Sure.
Yes.
Even better.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. That's a good timeline here, I guess, for everybody. We okay with that?
Do you need a motion?
Sure.
How specific do I need to be? Can I say, I make a motion that the attorney revise the village manager position description based on the discussion of this meeting?
That's fine.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Wonderful. Mary, are you okay with that? I'm going to make sure. Okay. Alrighty, so our next meeting, we'll have that on as our next agenda, as items for next agenda. I think we'll postpone any more discussion on the HR position right now. But I think that, you know, we want to, you know, keep that for the new village manager, so. Alrighty, it was a long ways to get to that point. A lot of discussion, but I think that's the right decision, so. Any other things for the next agenda that you'd want to see on there right now? I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.